Good morning, everyone. We want to thank you for joining us today for the Engaging Relatives Through the RFA Process webinar with Dr. Denise Goodman. This webinar is the first of a three-part RFA engagement series. The other two trainings will focus on how to engage youth and those considering placement. Both presentations will be broadcast later this year. On today's webinar, Denise will be sharing some tips and strategies on how to engage and work with families toward timely approvals, how to overcome barriers, roadblocks, and how to stay motivated during the process. So a few logistics. Everyone is in the mute position right now. If you have any questions, please use the question box or you can use the chat function, but there will be time at the end of the webinar for questions. So with that said, I would like to welcome Dr. Denise Goodman to the stage.
All right. Good morning, California. Yay, good to see your people in the room here with me, which is always nice than staring at a screen at myself. So thank you very much. And Marjana promised me the Cindy Crawford lens, so I'm sure I look tall, thin, and a little bit younger to you at this point in time. So this is a really important discussion. Our relative caregivers are really critical because if you were to think for a minute, how many kids in the state of California are living with relatives or non-related family members, friends of the family, whatever, it's probably tens of thousands of kids. And could we possibly recruit and approve that many resource parents? That would be a really tough job. So I always think of it that the kids have, in fact, recruited their own family in the manner of speaking. So one of the things I think is important is to recognize that these are critical, and these folks are critical, and we have to take care of them every step of the way. It's something that a lot of folks hadn't planned on doing. They kind of got this call on the spur of the moment, and I think it's something that we have to always keep in the back of our minds that this wasn't in their plans. They did not have their ducks in a row. So we think of these questions, because I hear this all the time, that our traditional resource parent applicants versus our relative resource applicants are different. So think about that for a minute, where you are, about how are they different? What makes one better or worse than the other? I don't know if that's the right wording, but anybody in the room here, what do you think is the difference between I'm sure the folks at home are thinking the same things that you're thinking. What makes them different as applicants? Yes. Motivation. So again, there might be different motivations between the kids. They want to step up for this kid that they have a relationship with. Or many times, people coming in, they might want to help, get back to their community, expand their family. What's another difference that you see? Yes?
The relatives may already know the youth or child.
So the relatives may already know the youth. So there is perhaps some relationship, even if it's just something that I know I'm blood related to this kid, they look like a family member, where our traditional resource parent applicants, this is going to be a stranger's child coming to stay with them. Any other differences?
The youth also knows the relatives.
Right. So the flip side is that the youth know the relatives and know of the relatives, where, again, it's a stranger that this child is going to, which has to be pretty scary if you think about it. So I think that to recognize that there are differences, and that the typical resource parent applicant who comes in has thought about it for 1 year, 2 year. I'm going to wait till my kid graduates from high school. I'm going to wait until my shift changes on my job or till I finish my degree and everything. So they're lining up their ducks in a row. They're getting things ready. The relative caregiver answered the phone and in 2 seconds said yes. And so they don't have anything organized or ready to go. And their life has just been upended, and it's a crisis. I think about it every day, that if I got a call from Cincinnati, Ohio, that my daughter and son-in-law weren't faring well as parents, and that I would have to take teenage boys into my house, my life would change a lot. First of all, my house would smell like a foot the entire time for these teenage boys. But it would be. My schedule would have to be different. I'd have to, think about getting a real job instead of being on the road. I'd have to get kids to appointments. I'd have to, be there to, cook them real food and all those things. So my life would drastically change in a heartbeat. And that's what has happened to these families. And we think about, we talked about some of these reasons why these differences exist, and we can keep that in the back of our mind. I think it's important. So I think it's like thinking about how do we have to approach our work differently with our relative caregivers. Anybody have an idea of how we have to approach our work differently? Think about that back at your place. Anybody in the room? No?
Patience.
Patience? Yes. I mean, I think we have to have that empathy and understanding about what has changed in their life in a heartbeat, and that they're going to need some help from us to get through this process. At the same time, they're trying to care for kids and get them where they need to be. So yes, I think we have to approach a little bit differently and perhaps have different expectations of what it's going to be like to get this family through the RFA process, right? And as I said, most families don't plan on doing this, right? I certainly have a zillion stories, as you probably have, of relatives. I remember the one woman who I had in a kinship support group. She told me that she had, had just 1 week left in her job to her retirement after working 40 years, and that she had planned this big 10-day cruise, and she was very excited about it. And then she got 4 grandchildren. She had to rescind her retirement because she needed the funds, and had to cancel her cruise, losing money. So that was a huge change in her life, going from living by herself to having 4 kids you have to herd around and manage. So a lot of things, even in my own family, my niece and her husband took in relatives' children. They had to rearrange furniture in their house. They had to get a bed, and then all of a sudden they had to have, kids to different appointments. And thank God that the family was able to support and help her, but it certainly became a little bit of a chaos there for quite a while. So let's talk about some of the typical roadblocks that our families experience in going through this. And you know what? Some of these may also apply to not only our relative resource families, but to, in general, some resource families. First of all, this is very, very important that they're caring for the children that they didn't expect to care for. And we want them to get a physical and a dental and an eye appointment, get them enrolled in school or in daycare. Oh, yes, we have visitation twice a week. And then there's these court hearings and these CFTs and all kinds of stuff going on that they have to figure out in their schedule. Yes, it's kind of crazy to think about all the things that have to happen, going to therapy and everything. It is kind of crazy. So those are some roadblocks that, finding my marriage license at this point isn't a priority over taking care of the children and getting their needs met. And of course, the children really need to come first. That's why we have to help. Next is managing the agency's requirements. A lot of things that have to happen, When you're doing the home assessment, we have to make sure we have those smoke detectors working and fire extinguishers and all those things. Getting those home visit scheduled to come out and do the interview. Oh, and then there's training I have to attend, and then I have to find childcare. And you know what? I haven't had to hire a babysitter in, 30 years, so I have to figure out who can do that for me now. So I think, again, it's the kind of dual demands of what we're asking versus caring for the kids. That makes it tough for a lot of our folks. It is a confusing process. Now, I can't see anybody at home. I can see people in the room. But you know what? We have lots of folks that are RFA staff in the field, maybe even in state office, who it's confusing to us. So if it's confusing to us, the people on the inside, who this is our world, and we understand the lingo, and we kind of understand paperwork, imagine being somebody, from the public who's never been involved in something like this before. Imagine if English is not your first language. Imagine if your reading and writing skills are a little tough. Imagine if you've relocated because of fires. Where's your paperwork, right? It's got burned up in the fires. And so I think we have to recognize that it is a very confusing and daunting process, not to mention incredibly intrusive. And so that's an important thing. I always kind of joke with people because they'll say, well, if people can't fill out the paperwork, they shouldn't be resource parents. And I say to people in my class, some of you can't fill out, Margana's going to say, you can't fill out the expense reimbursements properly. You do not be a social worker. So certainly people who aren't used to filling out paperwork, this is even a bigger thing for them. Getting the documents together. you know? I mean, even if I needed something, I'd have to go on a big dig for it at home. But again, recognizing that we have had disasters like fires, mudslides in California that have rendered people's paperwork and documentation gone, right? And if there's been a divorce or several moves, trying to find things is hard, not knowing where to go to get them, not knowing what you would need to replace them. Those are things that I think make it really, really hard for folks to be able to do this. You know, I just remember when I was contracting with the state, all the paperwork that was required from me to be able to have the contract that I had to track down and everything. And I'm really kind of neurotic and organized because I'm a Virgo. Some of you are Virgo out there, you know what I'm talking about. That, you know, but it's still hard to get everything in one place and get it all in, okay? The home assessment itself, as I said, you know, we have a lot of safety requirements for families and children. You know, we have a lot of visits to the home. You know, I think my home, which I'm try to keep up to date with repairs and everything, but I probably wouldn't be prepared to take a young child. I'm sure my home is not safe for a crawling 2-year-old. 2-year-olds would be walking by then, shouldn't they? See, that's why I do teenagers. But, you know, I don't have the gates. I don't have the little plugs. I don't have, you know, all those kinds of things that kids, and God forbid you go in my office and see the 9,000 snakes of wires under my desk and everything that, yeah, maybe my water temperature isn't correct. Who knows? Maybe I have lead paint. I don't know. But there's a lot of things that I think people don't recognize that we have to do a checklist and make sure that everything is going to be safe for kids. And for me, I'm old. I haven't had young kids in my home for a really long time. I don't even know where to begin to make it appropriate for them. And what if I didn't have the funds to do some of the things? You know, to go out and buy 2 or 3 smoke detectors, 2 or 3 fire extinguishers. You have to have CO2. Yeah, carbon monoxide detectors, all that stuff. I mean, you could lay out a lot of money. If you're a family, we know that our relatives, many of them are at or below the poverty line, and they're living paycheck to paycheck. That's a significant outlay of funds that they may not have, so they may have to wait till I can get the money to do those things, all right? Scheduling, it's a big thing. So you give me 3 kids who have visitation, who have health appointments, who have mental health appointments, who have school activities, right? Plus I have my own schedule of work or whatever. It's pretty tough to kind of factor in when I can get you to be over to the house. And that's, I think, a big issue that happens sometimes, you know, is trying to catch up with people, just trying to get them on the phone to schedule, just trying to find a time we both can be there in the home together. And, you know, a lot of times it's like when I try to go to, for example, I'm trying to donate clothes to Dress for Success, right? If you're familiar with it, but they always like to see me come because apparently there are short, squatty women like me that need clothes for work. And I donate clothes all the time. And so I looked up online the other day, and when are they open? They're open from 9 to 4. I work. There's no weekends. There's no evenings. So again, sometimes, you know, it's like I know you have lives and you have families, but sometimes we might have to be flexible about getting to the families when they can be home with the kids. Being motivated, this is really interesting because the families are, in fact, motivated to care for the kids, or they probably wouldn't have said yes, okay? But the thing is, motivated to get the approval process done becomes another challenge. And what are some of the barriers in that motivation department? Anybody? Anybody in this room or at home?
Too many forms.
I couldn't hear you.
Too many forms.
Too many forms, right. I'm kind of overwhelmed by it all. That, oh my gosh, you know, and it's really sad because this is not a good example, but those of you who've been with me before know that I'm the master of bad examples, okay? But, you know, I was adopting a dog, and I had forms to fill out. Even though I really, really, really wanted that dog, the forms were a little bit overwhelming. I got a few questions, and it was like a question came up, and I'm like, well, how am I supposed to answer that? You know what I mean? Will someone be home with this dog 24 hours a day? No, I work. The dog wants to eat, I got to work, right? So it was like, how am I going to answer that when I can still get the dog? A lot of forms, gathering the documentation. Sometimes we think about the fact that, we're providing funding to the family, so what's their motivation to complete the process? And you know what? That funding isn't going to be there forever. So we do have to get it. Plus, it's very intrusive. And I don't know if at a point in time you're going to find something out about me and take the kids away, right? Because I don't really know what's good and what's not good from your perspective, Sometimes I've had people who didn't complete the process because they messed up the paperwork and too embarrassed to tell me they messed up the paperwork. That's easy. We have plenty of paperwork. We can give you new ones, right? But there's a lot of reasons that they're, might be slowed down in that process from their own perspective in terms of getting it done. So I think sometimes it's important to kind of look at your families and begin to determine what is it that's slowing those families down? What is it that they need? Is it the fact that English is not their first language and the forms are confusing, or we have all kinds of abbreviations on there? I had a woman one time who it said on the form AKA, and she said, "No, I'm a Delta." What's a DOB? A lot of those things that a lot of folks didn't know what those words meant, and they were too embarrassed to ask me what those words meant. Is it the fact that their documents got burned up, or the documents are misplaced or lost, or they've never seen them before, or they're not sure what you're talking about? So those are things that I think they might find the certificate from the church, but you need the legal certificate from the state that shows they're married. So it's those kinds of things that sometimes get in the way. I think working together, this is a big thing. Developing that relationship, and we'll talk more about this later, can be something that helps with the motivation. But, it's one of those things where if we click and it goes well, we understand each other, but if there's some little rub there, then that can be a barrier as well to getting this done. All right, so let's go ahead and help the families, as I said, solve the mystery, because it is, like I said, a daunting and confusing process for families. It's daunting for the staff, and let's figure out how we can get it done. First of all, spend some time explaining it to them. Don't assume they know all the steps. Their heads are spinning because they're trying to deal with kids, getting kids to bed, getting homework done, or now it's getting what we're going to do with them in the summer to entertain them, and planning ahead for school and getting them enrolled in school and all the stuff that comes with that. Do I need their shot records? Do I need this, that, or the other? So to me, I think slowing it down, sitting down, and I'll show you, you might have some tools that you can develop, whether it's a little checklist on the steps, a little roadmap for them about what the different steps are, explained in public language, not the inside social worky jargon that we tend to use. I don't know how many times I've had to ask Morgana, what does this word mean? What's this abbreviation? I've been doing child welfare for over 40 years, but everybody has their own lingo every state I go to. So again, you got to slow it down. What's that form number? What's that for? Why am I doing this? And I think that's the important thing, is to help people understand why we're asking them to do this. A lot of times people might think, oh, you're just putting me through the ringer. Well, we pretty much put everybody through the ringer, sad to say. And why? Because we want to keep kids safe. And I think being able to posture this process as being a way to make sure the children are safe and you're prepared might be helpful to families. It's not just hoops that families are jumping through. There's a reason that we put families into this process. We want to get to know you so that we can provide the supports that you need. We want to get to know your children so we can get the supports that they need. We want to make sure that your house is safe because, we don't want a crisis or some calamity happening in your home. So explain the process, but also why we ask for certain things. Why do we ask for your fingerprints? Well, beyond that, it's federal law, is because, unfortunately, there have been times when people have come in to be a resource parent, not only here, but across the United States, where their background could have posed a threat to children, right? Why do we have to come and inspect your home? Because we just want to make sure that there's nothing that could harm a child. And something that you may not think about, that the bleach is sitting out, could be something that could harm a child. So explain it, the process, and why we do the things we do. Next, as I said, plain talk. Get out of the social worky language. You know, remember, we're talking to people who haven't been immersed in this culture of child welfare. Very plain talk, okay? Not that you talk down to people, but you just use words everybody can get. And I said repeat as often as needed. You know, if I stand here and explain to you the entire process, you may not forget, you know, all 10 steps. You may not remember step 3 through 10 after I leave. So I may have to just, you know, get really in depth with steps 1 and 2 and then kind of give a headline to the rest of the steps and then go deeper into 3 and 4 the next time I'm here. So again, repeat as often as necessary because this is a new language for them. This is a new world for them. It's like when I go into the store to buy a computer, you know, those people have a whole culture there, right? And they talk about gigabytes and all this other business. And I don't get it, you know, so they have to repeat it to me like 27 times. So don't feel bad about having to do that, okay? And use written tools. I'm going to share with you a little later on some tools that we've uploaded that are from other jurisdictions that you might think you could recreate that might, or create something similar that might be helpful to your families. I think anytime we give people a cheat sheet, it's helpful. It really is. So we're going to take a look at that. You know, so different places, like for example, trying to remember where it was. I think it was in Oklahoma that we designed. We called it the roadmap. They call it certification there, but it kind of outlined the steps that you went through, and under each step, what that was about. So people had something tangible that they could look at and think about or check off where they were. The documents. This is a big one that's a challenge to our families. You know, we want all this stuff. Well, there's a couple of things that we can do to help it. If you provide an envelope with postage back to your agency, it's going to help. That self-addressed stamped envelope, right? So if I'm mailing them some forms, mail an envelope that has postage on it to get back to you, right? I think that's an important thing. You know, that way they can fill it right out and pop it in the mail. It won't be anything difficult. Trying to reduce the barriers and hurdles. And you know what? Just getting a stamp sometime, right? Just getting a stamp. You know, you got to be able, if you have a credit card, you can do the outside stuff, or if you don't know, they sell them at Walmart or wherever. You have to go to the post office when you work, and the post office is closed when you get there, and all that business. Giving them a checklist, whether it's a checklist for all the documentation you'll need. I'm going to share one with you later on. It's called Get Started Now. We designed that in Louisiana after Katrina because we recognized very quickly one of the barriers to the families was their paperwork got washed away in the hurricanes and the ensuing floods. And so they didn't have the stuff, so it was holding people up. And then they didn't know where to get replacements, right? And so we actually made a thing and had a list of all the documents that they would need. And on the back of it, it's one of the documents we uploaded. It actually says where you can get that and what you would need to replace that documentation, which I think is important for folks to know. You know, where would I get a new? I had one time come in and she was divorced. I said, well, we're going to need to have a copy of your divorce decree. So she says, well, where am I supposed to get that? I said, let me give you some ideas. You know, whatever court your divorce happened in, we'll have it. Your attorney you used should have it. But the next week she came back with a half piece of spiral-bound notebook paper that said, Dear County, Mrs. So-and-so is divorced, D-E-V-O-R-C-D, signed her attorney. So I didn't think that was quite official enough. So we had to help her get the document that she needed and direct her with an address and a phone number and what to say when she got there so we could get the paperwork. But I think it's really helpful to have those checklists. It really is. I'm kind of a checklist person anyway because I have a lot of things going on. And so whether it's, turning in my taxes, I have to have a checklist of all the stuff that has to be on there. I'm very, very neurotic about the checklist of getting my Ohio State football season tickets, so I make sure that's all on there and that I get that done. So, yeah, I think anything we can do to help people because they're so busy, and I think challenged by a lot of different things going on, to be helpful. I think carrying extra forms with you. If I'm going to go out to do a home visit, you know, you might want to carry a couple of sets of forms. That way, if they messed it up or they lost it, here you go. We have plenty of paper to give them. That's not a problem. But I think that way it's in the moment, not like I have to go back to the office, get one and mail it to you. Just keep a little folder of various forms, and when you go in, you can just give them another one. I think can be really helpful. I think this is the big thing. You know, we're in the home, and you say, well, I'm going to need a copy, I'm going to make up something. You know, I need a copy of your driver's license. You know, well, they're thinking, oh my gosh, I have to go down to CVS or wherever and make a copy of Staples, and then I'm going to have to mail it to you. Just your phone, just take a picture, send it to yourself. Ask the family, just take a picture and send it. You don't have to make a copy of your car insurance. Just take a good picture, take several pictures, in fact, we'll pick the best one, and send it to us. You know, I just think that's a really important thing, that we have so many easy ways now with technology that you don't have to. I'm kind of getting rid of address books. When I have somebody I'm sending something, I just take a picture of the address. I can find it easier on my phone than somewhere in my computer. So think about that and encourage the applicant to do the same. You know, if they're old like me, they don't think of those things right away, and they probably have a smartphone of some sort or another. Encourage them to take a picture and then show them how to send stuff to you, all right? Help them complete the form. As I said, it's a daunting task, and it might be that just tell them to do the best they can and that you will be there to sit with them and complete the form. And you could just like interview them, ask the questions, and write the information in. And that might be the quickest way to get it done, because they might not necessarily understand the question or how much information you need for that question. Well, you know the context, and that way you could just write it in and get it done. And you know what? In a lot of ways, asking those questions, it might lead me to another question that would help me on my evaluation, right? The family evaluation. Is that the wording that you use? Okay, just checking, because everybody has different words, remember? We call it the mutual home assessment, family assessment in Ohio. So, but I think just sitting down and helping people complete the form, I think it can happen a lot quicker that way. And you can get it done and get information that you could store in the back of your head to follow up on, right, when you're going to be doing your interviews. I think, again, we talked about the use of email and uploading. You know, make it easy. I mean, everybody has a smartphone. Just about. Everybody has a smartphone. And they can be able to do those things that way instead of having to go through the process of finding a place to, you know, mail it or copy it or all those things. You can get done very quickly that way. And again, don't assume they know how to do it, because I've had to have teenagers instruct me on how to upload and email to somebody. So you might want to walk them through that, write them some cheat sheet down of how they can do it in the future, even though you're not there. Jumpstart the form. You know, it might be filling out the name, address, phone number, because we do ask that question 97 times. But is there any way we can jumpstart the form with information we know, because it is a relative caregiver, so that they don't have to complete everything on the document? And I think that they would appreciate that if you're able to do that. I know some of you are using Vinti out there, and Vinti does that automatically for you, or for them, I should say. So I think that's really, really helpful if you can do anything. Hey, I started this for you. I filled out what I could, but I need the rest from you. And that way, you know, it's more of a partnership as opposed to, again, a hoop I'm asking you to jump through. I do this a lot when I was doing assessments, was sending homework and reminders. So I might say, hey, I haven't gotten this form from you yet, little sticky note. You know, I filled part of it out, but you need to complete it and sign it. And I put an envelope in here for you to mail it back to me. And can you do that by the end of the week? So I might call them and remind them, but sometimes we just have to do those things to help people who are like running pillar to post with kids to get all the stuff done that has to happen for kids when they come into our care. And I think particularly at the front door, we're trying to do all this stuff, and they're just trying to get a life settled with children in their home now. And of course, be patient. You know, we can't understand why they're not getting this done, but they are caring for the kids. That's the big thing. And of course, that's the thing that should be most important to us. So what can we do to be a partner with them in this process so that, yes, the kids are getting the greatest care possible, but also we can get this done so that we get them approved and can be funding them appropriately with that. So again, be patient. Understand that, unless you want to take the kids for an afternoon while they fill out the paperwork. Just a thought. They're laughing at me in the room. So this is a big thing. We want to make sure the home is safe. And of course, while we may get it to the point where it passes that safety part early on, we have to recognize anytime we're in the home, we're continuing that kind of eyeball on the situation to make sure that it continues to be safe, right? I always have to make this point because, I'm thinking like in Ohio, a lot different here because you have nicer weather, but like in Ohio, people do have pools in the summer. You get to use it for about 8 days before the first frost. But, they may not have had a pool when you first approved them, right? But then they get kids, they say, oh, we should get a pool. And then they put one in, but they didn't know about all the pool rules. So to me, it's like something every time we're out there, whether it's RFA staff or it's permanency staff, whoever, they should be putting an eyeball on the home because it may not be anything sinister. It's just that people just didn't think about doing it. So we want to make sure our kids are always safe. So any concerns in the home that you have, let's address it early to give them time to take care of it. Whether it's that bare wire hanging from the ceiling or that hole that's covered up with a throw rug on the floor, right? Those kind of things, or a lot of extension cords, or whatever other safety things you might see that they have rat poison out under the front porch to kill rats. All those things, try to identify those early so families can take care of it. If you see their fence is leaning, and everything, hey, that could fall on a kid and hurt a kid because they're going to try to climb it. So early, let them know, be very specific what they would have to do to remedy that situation. I noticed you didn't have any smoke detectors. Your fire extinguisher expired if you happen to have one. I'm always checking mine. So particularly right now before 4th of July when my brothers come and cook. And then one year they bought really bad fireworks that about burned down my neighborhood. So they have been banned from fireworks. I said, do not bring that to my house. So, but I think all those things, when you're looking, I think it's really important that when you're looking at the home, look outside the home, the backyard. Is there an old car that's up on blocks in the yard, right? Or is there an old refrigerator, on the back porch that they haven't gotten rid of yet? Those are all, particularly for our young children, really kind of scary safety hazards for them. So look at, where I live, this is the difference between Ohio and one thing, there's no fences between me and my neighbors, right? Rami knows the Midwest thing. He just kind of lives there. He just has no fences. But, 4 doors down is a little pond. I have been down there since 1992 when I bought the house, been down there once, and that was to get a dog back. She was going down to get the geese, right? Grandkids, that's the first thing that they see. So be sure when you're in there looking, look around to the whole environment. So early safety concerns, so we can address those and have plenty of time to do that. Checklist for the home assessment. In the documents, one of the documents that I posted was a thing that we designed in Clark County, which is Las Vegas, Nevada. And, a lot of issues with homes there sometimes. So we actually took, and they made it a lot harder than I would have made it. I would have made it a little more user-friendly. But what they did was took their state form and kind of made it simple. Here's what you need. Is this an issue? Yes, no, whatever. I mean, are you able to unlock doors from both sides? Yes, no. I did this for Cleveland, made it very simple, 1-pager, just circle yes or no. They could go around the house and do it themselves. And that was important. Of course, question number 6 was, are guns, ammunition, and weapons kept in a safe and locked manner? Which I thought was when I wrote it, was pretty direct and understandable. And one night train, this little old lady come up to me with the paper and said, Miss Denise, what kind of gun should I buy? I'm like, oh, no. We had to fix that one. If you have guns. Yeah, get it. 357. But, it is something that just letting people be aware of what has to be safe in their home and letting them think about it ahead of time, so that they can be planning on it or start repairing it or fixing it or accommodating it so that our kids can be safe. Like there's no screen in the window, right? Or there's no bars on the beds if you're having little kids or whatever it is. They can plan on taking care of that. So look at the extra document, and I'll refer back to it in a couple minutes. This is a big thing. We have funding, the FIPR monies. I'm looking at all the people in the room that would know about have carried over, correct? Can I hear it from the room? That hasn't carried over? We're waiting for the signature, but we're this close. Waiting for the budget thing to be signed. But from the big guy, I could go forward that signature and get it done. But anyway, yeah, so if you do have those kind of fundings, and there'll be other fundings for kids, particularly stepping into families from group care, that those are things that you can help families get their home ready whenever possible. I know working in Santa Clara County, if there's anybody on there from Santa Clara, years ago when we did family to family, we actually were working with one of the neighborhood resource centers there, Nuestra Casa. And they were awesome because what they did is they would actually help. They had a men's group that would help families who had housing problems. The front steps are kind of shaky. We could fix that. There's no railing on the steps. We can fix that. So small little things. This men's group would come help foster families get their homes ready. Maybe Habitat for Humanity. I don't know what you have in your community, but I think it'd be worth it finding out if there are any groups from the faith organizations or other fraternal organizations that would be willing to be there to help someone who's a relative and caring for kids, just do some minor fixes in the home to make them in compliance for whatever has to happen. So just think about that. So be on the lookout for the signature, okay? They know I nagged them about these things. Anyway, scheduling home visits. See, there you are, you and Snoopy going out for the home visit, right? And this is a big one. I think that a lot of times we say, oh, I got to go see Mrs. Jones. But what's our plan when we're out there with Mrs. Jones? Otherwise, it's like, ever go to the doctor and you leave the doctor, it's like driving home like, oh, I forgot to ask for that refill. Oh, I wanted a referral for that, right? How many times does that happen, right? And RFA people are busy people, juggling a lot of different balls. So I'm going to tell you a secret that I do that we can use here. When I go to the doctor, I have a little list I type up on my phone. And when she comes into the room, I say, you're not leaving. And so we talk about all of this. She knows me now because I'm not even in the States 3/4 of the time. I need a flu shot, a shingles shot. I have to get all the shots because I travel on planes and it's nasty. And I need this, that, or the other. And by the way, refill. I want 90-day refill, so I'm time to go to the pharmacy. But I do that. The same thing here is I want to really suggest to you that plan what you're going to do on that home visit in advance. You have the right forms, you have the right questions, so that when you get there, it's a really solid working time. Let the family know in advance. Email them. Say, hey, I'm attaching this form for you, if they do email, and please, if you can complete that, I'll need that when I come out. So that way, it's a real strong working kind of session, as opposed to we're just out there chit-chatting and not really going anywhere. So have an agenda for yourself. You'll be surprised how much more work you can get done in a better period of time. And again, you're incredibly busy. We got to make the most of what we have. Next, when you're on the visit, schedule the next visit. While you're there, everybody get out your calendars, get out your phone, whatever it is, because, if I don't, then I have to track down that relative and leave a message. Then they have to track me down and leave a message, or we email back and forth. This way, if we could just schedule it right here and now while we're together, it'll just go so much easier. Okay? How many in your room used to do those kind of things? Just do it while you're there. I think it helps so much more. Being proactive. A lot of times you say, well, I haven't heard from them. Call them. Call them yourself. Leave a message. Text them. Email them, whatever it is. A lot of times we wait to hear from them, and guess what? They're waiting to hear from us about what the next step is. We're the professional. We're the RFA specialists. let's go, let's give them a call, leave them a message, tell them when we're available. And that is a big thing, leaving great messages about what you need, when you're going to call, when you're available. All those things can make a big difference. But don't wait for them to call you first. You call them. Real important thing. Okay? And the other thing is, too, I often wonder is that do they even recognize your number when it comes in, or do they think you're one of those scamming robocalls? So make sure that they know your number so when you call in, or have them put it right there in their phone so you'll pop up so they know who it is. I think confirm the home visit date. This is really important. And the time, everything. When you're going to be out, what day, where you're going to meet, if you meet at home, what you're going to meet, whatever it is, you know, because sometimes people get confused. They got a lot going on. And I used to love it when, I don't know if this is the next bullet point or not. No, this one here is, I used to get these calls all the time from my dog's vet. Hello, this call is for Tootsie Goodman. Yes, Tootsie, you have an appointment Thursday at 5 p.m. You know, please come 5 minutes ahead of time so we can, you know, log you in. That was a message for my dog. I thought it was kind of funny, but it was the way that I needed that reminder. It was kind of somewhere in the back of my head here, but I needed it to get up here so that I would definitely be on time and be there for the appointment. So they're running. They got a kid who is sick, and so they had the doctor's appointment. This way, at least they can tell you they're not going to be there if that's the case. These last couple of things, one thing I'm going to say 97 times today. First of all, be flexible. You know, as I said, if they have a school appointment or the kid got sick at school and threw up and they have to go get them, you may have to change your appointment. Okay? It may mean that you have to go out later in the day. It may mean you have to go earlier in the morning. You might have to meet them at lunch. But we have to be flexible to try to get these families through this process. It's that important. And also, I want to make sure these kids are safe in these homes. We do something real quickly. We put the kids in the homes. When you start digging deeper, sometimes there might be other things that would prohibit that family from being approved for that child. Be patient. You might have to ask for something 3 times. I always tell people, just nag me, please. It's okay. I won't be offended, you know. Or, you know, people will ask me for something. Here's my business card. Write on the back what you want and give it to me so I remember what you want. I got this card, but I don't know what they want. So to me, do as much as you can. Follow up with people. Follow up. Be proactive. It's okay to call and leave a message. Hey, how you doing? Just checking in. But I just wanted to give you a little nudge. I needed form XYZ. If you could go ahead and complete that form and scan it and send it to me, or take a picture of it and send it to me. Here's my email address or my whatever. Just remind people it's okay. And you can let them know in advance so you don't get offended that I kind of remind people a lot. I kind of am like your personal Alexa, right? If you have that. My nephew has an Alexa in his house, and I was staying with them. And so one night I was up late, and I started saying, tell Steve at 7 a.m. he's cute. Tell Emily at 9:15 that she's late to work. So I just left all these messages all day long. They thought it was hysterical. I mean, actually, it was kind of creepy. But I think, again, don't feel bad about leaving messages, sending a note, whatever. I think families would appreciate it. And, again, if you're letting them know up front, that I'll send you reminders because I know you got a lot going on. I think they'll appreciate that support from you. So these are the tools that are on our CDS website there that we are uploading more and more stuff all the time on there to support and help you. But as I mentioned, there's another thing that I'm going to actually figure out how to show you. But yeah, no, you might have to.
I can first share on screen.
Can you do it there? The brochure.
Okay, yeah.
So one of the things that we decided to do, because we were struggling with families getting through in a timely fashion in Las Vegas, is that we actually created a brochure, a trifold brochure that I put a copy on the website. I think Marjana's going to try to flip over for you to be able to see that. But it was something that where can we put everything simply in one small brochure that they could just put on the refrigerator, keep in their purse, right? Put on their coffee table, I don't care where, that help they could refer back to all the time. So in working with the RFA staff there, we were able to put down, first of all, a little description about what this process is about. and everything. And what are the different components of the process? Home visits, the safety inspection, or home assessment. You know, you're going to need references. Here, if you have a couple of ideas, write their names down here. We're going to need to do background checks and why, and the training that you'll need to receive. So we try to put it all in there so they could keep track of what they were, where they were in the process and everything. Could you find it?
Yeah.
She's coming. She's coming. Hang on. If you got it at home, though, take a look at it. Could be something, feel free to plagiarize, replicate, whatever. But each of you in the counties, are FFAs on with us, or just counties?
Yeah.
FFAs, everybody, just think about those tools that you can develop and design and to support the families getting through the process so they can be more proactive, you know, because this is something they just really is over their head and everything. So whatever we can do, whether it's to get started now, which is on here, a self-directed safety or home assessment, so that even if it's just the headlines, do I have a smoke detector on each level, right? Do I have a fire extinguisher? Do I have this? You know, can I open and lock a door from both sides? That was one of the things in Ohio we had to have so kids couldn't lock themselves in places. You know, all those kinds of our weapons and everything kept locked up. You know, our things that make fire in a safe place, lighters, flamethrowers, whatever you have, you know, torches, you know, all those things. They could at least go through and see what it is that you're going to be looking for and be prepared well in advance to you coming.
Hold on 1 second.
Okay, she's getting there. I'm tap dancing up here, can you tell? But hey, if you have questions, now would be the time while we're trying to pull up that document for you to be sending any questions in, because in a few minutes, we're going to be taking your questions. So, but think about that, and I'm going to be honest, if you're going to do something, share it with your buddies. Why reinvent the wheel? I think it'd be really, really helpful. So, he's got it. He's trying to find it.
That's what it is.
That's it right there.
So it's up.
Can they see
Yeah.
it?
Can they see it? It's not.
It's an Apple computer. This would be much easier.
It's up. It's just not up in here.
It's up there, but it's up at home.
Yeah. It's up on the screen.
So you can see it's a trifold. There's a front and a back, and it really is the ABCs of the process. It was kind of breaking it down, making user-friendly language, and putting the headlines of all the steps in there so that people would be able to kind of help themselves through the process and not be so dependent on staff. So that's why we did those kinds of things. All right? So you can see there's a place there where it talks about the home visits and what we'll talk about. There's a place there you can identify your references. It has a checklist of training. It has a also, I think, a conversation about the safety inspection. Yeah, it's not showing up on my computer.
Yeah.
It's showing up on your computer, and that's all that matters. So, like I said, feel free to plagiarize. People must make it really nice and agreed to let me share this with you. So think about what you can do to help your families through the process on their own. What tools and cheat sheets can you give them? All right? So now I think we're at the point where we can talk a little bit about motivation. And it's hard. Like I said, they're distracted. They're already getting paid, so that little carrot isn't out there anymore, but that can end at any time, right? That's provisional kind of money. So we have to make sure that families recognize that it's urgent, that we get you through this because, you know, they've been able to extend that. So again, one of the ways we can do is to keep calling them and keep on them. Keep track of what is needed. This is where you have to be organized. You have to have a checklist so that you know what's in, what's not in. I think that's the great thing about Vinti. Everything is right there. But for those of you without it, you have to do some things the old-fashioned way, whether it's to keep a checklist yourself. You know, years ago, I used to go over to the fiscal people and ask them for one of their big ledger sheets, and I could just write people's names and it was the old-fashioned, but it worked for me. And I could just check off when stuff came in and put the date in. That way I knew where people were in the process and could remind them about what still needed to be done. Come on. Okay. This is one I know sometimes we don't think we should have to do, but you may have to gather these documents yourself. Particularly for the families who have lost documents, you may have to fill out the application form, have them sign it, and send it in for them so that we can get whatever documentation it is that we need. Some things may be public record that we can get for them, but you may have to gather these yourself just to move the mission along. I think also making a list for them of what's outstanding. This is their homework. Just a reminder, here's when I need this. Anything can help just to continue that. Emphasize the need for them to complete this process. This is really important so that, again, your kids will be stable. You know, we know that the kids will be there. We know that you pass. You know, we know that when this funding runs out, that funding you can convert over to this other funding that will continue to support you and the kids. This is one of the big things, I think, is that really awesome relationship. And you have to think about what are your tricks of the trade in terms of building relationship with your relatives? Anybody in the room? What are your tricks in making good, positive working relationships with the relatives?
Responding to their emails or calls.
Yeah, you want them to be responsive to you. So as you said, be responsive to them. Because again, you get what you give, right? So if you're Johnny on the spot with their concerns and questions, then they're going to get back to you. Absolutely. What else? Yes.
Showing appreciation for them.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here for your grandchild or your cousin or your niece, your nephew, or your friend of the family. Thank you for stepping up for them, because I'm sure it's so much more comforting for this child to be with someone they know or are related to. Absolutely. No, you can't say that enough. You can't say that enough. I mean, I say to my niece, and those kids aren't even my relatives, but I thank her for being there for those boys, for two of them together, because definitely they would have separated them, you know. What else?
Just listening to them, listening to their concerns, their fears, their family dynamics.
Just listening to their story. They're going to have, this is where you got to put the phone down. Don't be distracted. You're fully engaged in the moment, and just listen, because they have to unload it on someone. And they're upset and they're nervous. It's been a crisis. They're worried. They're concerned. And just listen to that. That's it. The other thing is that you might have some families who are kind of irritated at the child's caseworker. You may have to listen to that, maybe give some suggestions, say, well, I can send an email to them when I get back to the office, but being a good listener, I think, is a really great part of it. What else?
Be personable with them.
Yeah.
So I mean, that sounds as little as like knowing their names, kind of remembering the last of the visit that occurred, and going into the new one.
So be personal with them. You know, remember their name. That's always a good thing. Remember the conversation from the last time. Oh, I see those flowers came up that you planted. They're beautiful. You know, whatever it is. And like, oh, are those the kids, spelling papers on the refrigerator? You're doing a good job with them. So even something like that, I think, can be really appreciated from their perspective. And I think also being incredibly astute when it comes to culture and diversity. So if I'm coming in, well, somebody much younger than me is coming in and everything, be careful how we address people. Because, if I'm calling somebody who's 50 years older than me by their first name, they may find that offensive, right? I may have to come in and be much more formal until they say, oh, just call me Betty, and everything. So just be aware of those kind of things. Wait to be invited into the home, be invited to where to sit. There's a lot of those cultural nuances that happen, and you can inadvertently, naively offend somebody. So I think being aware of those kind of things is really important every time that you go in. And also, little things like, do I shake their hand or not shake their hand? How close can I get or not get? I think understanding sometimes their words. I had a case one time and supervisor told me this story, this isn't my case, but was saying that, the new young worker was very enthusiastic. And the first grandma that she did a home study on, it was like, well, you'd be willing to take some other kids as well as your grandchildren and everything. And she goes, oh, before I do that, talk to the man upstairs. And the worker said, well, we need to fingerprint him. So obviously, being aware of the colloquialisms that some folks may have. And of course, if not everybody is fluent in English, being incredibly patient. If you have to use an interpreter, learn how to do that effectively. People are using sign language, learn how to use an interpreter there effectively and be very respectful, because when you're using an interpreter, I still have to make eye contact with the person I'm supposed to be communicating with and that's my relative. And I can always hear what the interpreter's saying. They may have to look away, that's fine, but I want to make sure that I'm connecting with the person I'm doing the RFA process on and respecting them and their home. So being careful not about having big reactions to things you see that may not be the way you live, right? So you have goats in the house. You may not have goats in your house, but for them, it's like a pet. Did you see the guy on the TV? I saw it this morning, who his emotional comfort pet is an alligator. He brings that thing on the plane, I'm out of here. So, but I'm just saying, so you got to kind of measure your reactions and responses a little bit to that, okay? So those relationships, we've just been talking about this, and some of the things you said, empathy. This is really a tough situation. They've had to upend their life, change their house around. You know, all of a sudden their sewing room now has 3 kids in it, and they've had to pack up everything, and it's in the basement, you know. Yeah, they don't play bridge anymore on Tuesdays because they got kids that have to be places, you know. Now they can't eat out because they have kids that they can't afford to take out. Good listener, good job. You guys got that one spot on. Being patient. I know we want to run through, rush through, but, you know, we can say, you know what, I'll send you a reminder this week. Just to, you know, I know you're going to remember now, but by the time I leave and you get involved in homework and baths and whatever, you're going to forget. So just to help us out, I'll send you a little something to remind you. So being patient with the families, but we have to take the burden of moving things along. And, of course, being their advocate, because they're going to have struggles and conflicts with the child's caseworker. And so we want to be able to be the kind of person that can help them over those humps and bumps. I may have to kind of school them on how to deal with the schools, right, and what an IEP is, and all those things, or getting WIC or other benefits that they're eligible for, and be able to do that. And, of course, serving as liaison to other parts of the agency. All important things that have to happen. But, again, the big thing is keeping things moving. You're going to have to be proactive. You cannot wait for the families. They are busy with the kids. They are busy with their own lives, their jobs. You're going to have to be the one that keeps things moving. It's the catalyst to get this done. So, I don't know, Marjana, do we have any questions? A good time. We have a few questions.
Yeah, actually, I have a question too. Can you speak a little bit about, with county and staff having a lot on their caseload, as we all know, can you speak a little bit about how leadership can support staff in getting these families through, and also, too, how staff can be working with their leadership for the guidance and assistance needed to get the families through the process?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, that leaders have a critical role in supporting their staff as well as supporting the families. So that may mean being aware of what the caseload challenges are, and advocating for possible, additional half a person even. I think also is when there are barriers and hurdles to support staff in getting by it and beyond it. If there's something where we really think this is a great family, but perhaps they have some hiccup in their background or some issue in the home that needs to be addressed, to find a way to get a waiver or to address it, and to back your staff on that. Because sometimes what happens is that, the staff are cooking along, and then all of a sudden they bump up against an issue and they get pushed back instead of having some brainstorming and troubleshooting and problem solving how to get beyond it, because they're the ones with the family, right? They're the ones with the family. And I've actually had several counties I'm working with in California who have talked about how, we kind of went out there on a limb in a couple of situations, and it really was the best thing for the kid. But those were jurisdictions where leadership supported them, encouraged them, and brainstormed with them of how to make it still safe and appropriate for the kid, even though there was this kind of barrier there. So that's an important kind of thing. So I think that leaders should be checking in regularly with their staff. Go down to an RFA staff meeting and find out what their challenges are and everything. And what I always tell people is, if you're going to complain about something, you have to give me a solution. So they just can't whine. We get a lot of that. But, if there's a significant issue or something that's consistently going on, then I need to know about it, because I can't help you unless I know about it. But then I want you to give me a reasonable tangible, concrete solution to that, and let's talk about how maybe we can make that happen. So I think keeping in touch, you know, one of the things I find very interesting, I was reviewing a PIP for another state, and they had several points on their PIP about workforce development, and not once was RFA in that. And RFA is still part of your workforce. Don't forget that. We always complain we don't have enough caregivers. We don't have enough resource parents. But when we start taking resources away from the very people who recruit and approve those families, how can we expect to get that robust pool of families that we need? And remember, as we started out talking, I want leaders to recognize that doing those relative resource parent approvals is a little bit harder and tougher because of all the things you have to navigate that other families coming in as traditional families kind of put their ducks in a row and took care of. So be willing to be the one that problem solves and troubleshoots and gets rid of those barriers in the way. All right, another question.
Let's see. Most of these are just statements, how counties have just kind of shared some of their best practices. LA County reported that they use their county-based organizations, the CBOs, to help with some of the relative approval, going through the home, make sure they have the smoke detectors and things like that. So that's one good resource for counties, is working with your CBOs or other agencies to help help families with that kind of getting home ready.
Be ready to move. I know that there's a lot of places where we've partnered with the fire department, you know, because in some jurisdictions, the fire department has to come do the fire inspection. I don't know if that's the case in California, but they don't have to do that. So, yeah, well.
Smoke detectors, like a partner.
Exactly. So what we were able to do was, if we had a family that we could approve, except they needed smoke detectors or fire extinguishers, that the fire department would not only donate them, but come install them. So, I mean, that's where you have to get out and let the community know what the needs are to help families in the community. You may not be able to be a resource parent yourself, but you can always help and support a resource parent. That's why, you know, getting these organizations, whether it's Habitat for Humanity, whether it's a men's organization at a church or something, to come out and do minor repairs, or have to have them come put together the bunk beds, or, you know, donate things, you know, because all of a sudden I'm going to get a couple of kids, I need a couple of beds. And again, if I'm living at or below the poverty line, to go out and buy 3 beds, not only the beds, but all the bedding. So if we can get partners that would be willing to do that for families that are taking kids on the fly, that would be awesome. And that would be helpful to you as well as to the families and the kids. So good one. Okay. Good point, Ella.
Have another.
We're going to do the throwdown to the rest of your counties here.
All right. So I have another question. Do you have any creative solutions for engaging a family in the process when they seem to drag their feet in completion because they believe the child may be reunited quickly, or when a youth is approaching 18?
Oh, okay. So approaching 18 and are reunited quickly. And I think that, I mean, obviously it's one of the things where to sit down with families and talk about, we never know. We never know. That's why we have a thing called concurrent case planning. You know, while we would hope and pray that every birth parent does what they need to do to have their child returned to them or children returned to them, unfortunately, there are things that happen. They relapse, right? They have mental health problems that inhibit their ability. They fall off the face of the earth and end up somewhere. We don't know. And the other part that we don't know is what the judge is ultimately going to say about this child's placement. So to me, it's like, I think you just need to work with them and help them understand why this is so important, that they can complete this process. Because, as I said, we never know plus I want to make sure, we never know what's going to happen in the case, but also I want to make sure that this child is securely in their home. You know, we don't want to find out the 11th hour that there's some issue that could move this kid. And even if this young person is almost 18, they can continue in care with AB 12. And so, again, if we're committed to this young person, you know, getting this done, that young person can continue on in your home with AB 12. And the other thing is that you may have found this experience so rewarding that you'd want to do this for other kids as well. Kids who perhaps didn't have the relatives who could step up for them. So, to me, I would, you know, and say, so what, you know, okay, I'm hearing that, but let's just continue to move forward. What is it that I can do to help you get to the next step? Not to complete it, just to get the next thing done. So sometimes breaking it down and chopping it up in smaller chunks doesn't feel so overwhelming, and they'd be willing to take that next step forward and everything. But I think with a kid who's almost turning 18, I want to really sit down and talk about the importance for that kid to have stability even beyond age 18 and how they could be that person, and we can help them with the resources and supports that they need.
Okay.
But chunk it down. Go one piece at a time instead of saying the whole thing.
So,
Johnna's reading.
yeah, I'm reading to see if there are any other questions. We can give them a couple minutes. Are there any other questions
Any questions in the room?
In the room?
Yeah, they don't want to.
Okay.
I do think the game changer while Marjana's looking is the relationship. That I have if I build that positive, supportive relationship with people, they know I'm not throwing them under the bus. You know, sometimes they'll want to do something just because they want to please me. I mean, I'll say it that way, that they want to please me. So that relationship is of utmost importance to people. So I can't emphasize that enough. So people say we don't have time to build relationships. I'm not asking you to date them. I'm asking you to have quality interactions when you are together, whether it's on the phone, whether it is on an email or a text. Hey, how you doing? Just checking in. How are the kids? And how are you doing? You know, asking how they're doing is a really important thing. Everything. I'm just following up because we've got a couple of things we need to do to move forward. Here's our next 2 things we need to do. You know, that way it's not a whole laundry list, which feels overwhelming. But if I give you 1 or 2 things to do, it might seem doable in the context of everything else that has to get done.
Okay.
Okay, Morgana's still reading.
I think that's it, because a lot of them are personal. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit, Denise, about what may be considered a lack of motivation is really, like Dr. Joseph Crumbly, right? Is a really, you know, resentment or hard feelings. Like, I don't want to adopt my, you know, or take care of my daughter's kids. She's going to get them back. That hope that it's not really lack of motivation. It's just their own internal feelings.
Right. I think there's Joe Crumley is awesome man. Sad that he's starting to cut back, you know, because he's been around for a long time. He's brilliant. But yeah, I mean, we have to, and I think that's the whole thing, is understanding some of the source of the motivation, you know. So it could be the fact, like the question came in, that, you know, I don't want to adopt this is my daughter's child. I'm just here to help out in the short haul. And I think there's a lot of cultural nuances around that, you know, in terms of everything. And so to me, it's, you know, I want to make sure that until your daughter is able to get the children back, that we know they're going to be here. We don't want anything interfering with that, like not having this approval process done. And so, to me, I want to honor that and everything. And I think I would want to say that, you know, I'm hoping and praying that your daughter is able to get these children back. But we need to do what we need to do now for the kids to keep them stable, to keep them safe. We want to make plan B just in case, you know, so that it doesn't disrupt their lives. And we want them to be with you. And so we have to move through this process. I also think there's a lot of cultural issues, too, in terms of a public agency or even a private agency. UFFA's out there, you're sleeping with the enemy. They know it, right? I'm not kidding. And so this is an incredibly personal and intrusive process. And you're asking me a lot of stuff that has, to me, I have no idea why you're asking, because it has nothing to do with taking care of these kids in people's minds. That's why I talked about how it's important to say why we have to do what we have to do. But I also think that people are scared about what you're going to do with this information. Who else is going to see it? I feel I'm kind of resenting it, because what goes on in my home stays in my home, and you're a stranger to me. That's why that relationship comes in as something very important. Because once you're not as much of a stranger to me, I get a little more forthcoming with things. I do think there's a lot of cultural things, particularly with the atmosphere in our country around people who are not officially U.S. citizens, and their fears of what could happen to them. Or maybe I'm here legitimately, but a family member in my home is not, so I'm afraid of what could happen then. There's all those kind of nuances that come in. And, you know, again, is this something where, I'll just say it, white people coming in, want to know all my business and my dirt, and I never know if you're going to ask me something that's going to get me in trouble. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on, whether it's classes, whether it's racist, whatever it, bias, whatever it is, and people are well aware of it, and even though you may not be doing it, may still feel that way. So that's where I mentioned being on top of that, issues around culture, diversity, and it could be also recognizing age differences, right, in terms of how we do things, you know. With people, Marjana knows this, I'd rather pick up the phone and talk to you for a minute than send 22 emails back and forth. But that's my generation, where, you know, I was really afraid that my grandson who just graduated from high school would never speak. I mean, I think I never knew he got braces for months because all I saw was the top of his head like this. I never saw it. But the best thing ever happened to him was we got a job in an ice cream shop and he had to talk to people, right? So now he talks. It's great. But, you know, I'm much more of a conversational person. I would be the person that drives through the toll booth where there's real people take my money. And I could say, hey, how you doing? Have a nice day. That makes me feel so good. But, you know, that's the thing. You have to kind of flex yourself in terms of your culture, in terms of your age, in terms of your race, to accommodate the people you're working with. So being that kind of flexible person to be able to make everybody feel comfortable, no matter who they are, is essential in getting this. Yes?
Going off of what Kendra was saying, remembering that people are in crisis, and what happens when we're in crisis, we either fight, flight, or freeze. And so some people are presenting themselves either being controversial or, you know, disagreeing with you, and that could just be their response to this crisis. So not quickly going to the point that they're not cooperating.
Right. You can't just fly to that spot like this is what's going on. You're right. It could be that I'm really, really angry at my daughter for not getting off those drugs. And I can see how upset my grandchildren are. I'm going to be really, really angry at her. She's not here now, but you, the worker, are here right now. So you're going to take that kind of displaced emotion and feeling. The freeze part could be another reason why they're not getting things done. They may be in denial, these kids are even staying, right? It's kind of like our kids, when our kids come home and refuse to unpack their garbage bag because they're going home tomorrow. They don't need to unpack this right now, you know? And and there may be people who don't return your phone calls or whatever because they're in that kind of flight. They're flying away from you. They don't want to get involved with you. They have these kids, and we never know what the family politics are in that given situation. It could be that I took these kids, but that my siblings, my adult siblings, are mad at me for taking my daughter's children because they think that I'm not taking these kids, that she would have gotten her act back together again. Or I have the other side of the family who is fighting with me because I have the children in my home. So you never know what all those behind-the-scenes family drama and dynamics are going on that they're having. I mean, I can think in our own situation that these boys' paternal grandmother was just constantly bashing my niece and my sister for taking the kids and everything. And of course, I was like, don't make me come out there, because I would say, where were you when these boys needed a home? But she got really mad because the kids were seeing my sister as their grandmother. And it's like, she was. She is. She does it, you know. But it's like, you got to get, and so that wasn't making him feel any better about this decision and all the other chaos that was going on in the home. So, yeah. So it's, there's a lot going on at one time, and you just happen to step in and add one more thing to it. That's why the patience and the flexibility and the support is so critical, and the listening at this given time and what's going on. All right. Marjana, anything else pop up?
No.
Oh, because it's going to be lunchtime and they don't want to miss out.
Right. Do you have any final before I make mine?
Any final things? Well, I'm going to say it one more time. You've got to be proactive. You have to be organized to help them stay organized to be able to do this. And this is so critical. So this is where you bring out your best social work stuff to be able to work with people and to kind of assess where they are and why are they having the flight, or freeze. You know, is this a cultural thing? You have to kind of like unpack why this motivation issue is coming up and decide what's going to be the best way to intervene, because what I do for this family may be very different than I do for that family. What I do today to motivate the family may be very different than I do next week. So you have to be very nimble and, like I said, bring out your best social work stuff. Okay? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Denise, for coming here today to do this presentation. Like I mentioned earlier, this will be the first presentation of a 3-part series, so please look out for information regarding that in the near future. And also, all the documents that Denise presented, they were uploaded to the webinar, so they are available for you to download. And the actual webinar, it will be available on our CCR website in the next few weeks. So please look out for that. And Denise also is still working with Department of Social Services, still in contract with us to providing technical assistance to counties. So if any county would like to receive TA from Denise, you can please reach out to me, Marjana Jackson, and I will make sure I email everyone my information. But other than that, we want to thank Denise again for providing this webinar, and also thank you everyone for joining us this morning.